What's up, kings and queens? It's your boy Dan from Daft Previews, and I'm back here once again for the most comprehensive NBA player prop preview you are going to see. In these videos, I take you through outlier.bet. We go through all the key players and their matchups. We talk about their form lines. I tell you what I like, and I tell you what I don't, and I do all this to give you all the information that you need to make the best bets possible. Now, this doesn't work for me every day. I am up close to 70 units for the season, but 2.2 unit loss yesterday. I've got to own that. We're very close to some. We're actually close to a plus 8 unit day. But look, close doesn't pay the bills. And when my picks are shit, I completely own it. So I apologize if you tailed. We didn't get it done, but the research was sound. We were very close, but it wasn't to be. So today's a new day. Now let's go. All right, we're jumping into the Charlotte Hornets versus the Detroit Pistons. Trey Mann is a game time decision in this one, as well as Quentin Grimes. But let's start off with these Detroit Pistons, shall we? Cade Cunningham, our first man up. His points prop in this game is 22.5. The matchup, not the easiest matchup, but it's not a hard one against Charlotte. Cade's covered this in 7 out of his last 10, and he's got 12 points in his last matchup against the Charlotte Hornets. You're looking at his 3-point prop. That did hit for us the last time we bet on him. The matchup is pretty good here against the Hornets. He's hitting 7 out of his last 10 games. The over 2. I personally would be looking at 2.5. Let's take a look at the plus money. And yeah, 7 out of his last 10 games. Had 2 3-pointers made against Charlotte the last time they played. He shot 2 from 5, but he did only play 24 minutes. Over his last 10, he's playing 32 minutes a night, and he's averaging 6.4 attempts per game. So look, plus money here. Pretty good matchup for Cade Cunningham. I don't hate this bet. I'm going to add it to my short list. As you know, I add all these players to my short list. I research them a little bit further after the video is posted, and if it feels right, we own. So Cade Cunningham, 3-pointers made. I don't hate that, so I'll look into it a bit later. Jumping into his assist prop, he lines at 8.5. It's plus money. He's covered in 3 out of his last 10. The matchup's not good or bad against the Hornets, and he had 6 assists the last time they played. Looking at his rebound prop, that line is at 4.5. He's covered in 6 out of his last 10 games. It's a great matchup here against Charlotte, and he only had 2 rebounds the last time these teams faced off. So, yeah, I'd have to say his 3-point market probably excites me the most, but not bad. Cade Cunningham should have a pretty good game here. Let's have a look at Isaiah Stewart, Beef Stew. Now, his points line is at 10.5. He was hitting this at a very consistent basis, has dropped off as of late, has had some difficult matchups, though. This matchup against the Hornets is not difficult, but it's not an easy one either. Now, Beef Stew has covered this in 3 of his last 4 against them. If we look at his assist prop, that line's at 1.5, 6 out of his last 10. Good matchup, hitting 2 of his last 4. His rebound prop, line's at 6.5, minus 135, 6 out of his last 10. The matchup's not very easy, but he has hit this in 4 consecutive games against the Hornets. Jalen Duren, his points line, 13.5. At first glance, that looks a little bit low to me. He's got a great matchup here against the Hornets. He's covered this in 5 out of his last 10. He has covered in his last 2 against Charlotte, both of these this season. Prior to that, he went under in 3 consecutive games. So I think the line is just about right. I could be tempted to take that, but maybe his rebound prop would be better suited. Line in this game is 11.5. He's hit this in 3 out of his last 10. Does have a good matchup, and he's covered this in 3 out of his last 5 against the Hornets. So does have a good matchup, but hasn't got it done enough consistently to get me a bit aroused to look into it a bit further. So I'm going to have to pass on that for Jalen Duren. Having a look at Asar Thompson. His points prop, 11.5. Good matchup here against the Hornets. 4 out of his last 10, and he's gone under in his last 2 games against them. His rebound prop, 6.5. 5 out of his last 10, and 1 of his last 2 against the Hornets. So, yeah, that doesn't give me any tingles. Jaden Ivey. His points prop, 19.5. It's quite high. Tough matchup here against the Hornets. He's covered in 1 out of his last 10 games. If you look at his last 20, 5 out of his last 20. So 1 out of his last 10, though. So at first glance, I'd probably have to lean to the under here. In head-to-head matchups, he's covered in only 1 of his last 5. Went under in both games this year, but he was only playing 23 and 21 minutes. In his last 10 games, he's playing about 29.9 minutes per game. So I'd honestly still lean to the under in this one, just saying. But let's have a look into his assist prop. That line is at 3.5. He's covered in 5 of his last 10. The matchup is a good one here against the Hornets, and he's covered in 4 out of his last 5 games. His rebound prop, 3.5 as well. 1 out of his last 10. And in head-to-head matchups, he's gone under in 5 straight. Depending on what odds are better, I'll either lean for his points under, that's minus 119, or I'd look at his points plus rebounds, lean to the under of that. So he has covered that in his last 2. So maybe not his points plus rebounds, but yeah, definitely his points. His points, I don't mind that, but that could possibly form a parlay here. So because the odds aren't the best, Ivy under points. All right, take a look at these Hornets. What do we got? Grant Williams, he's inconsistent as hell. I wonder if he's starting in this game. Starting at power forward in this one. So against the Pistons, he does have a good matchup. He's covered this in 4 out of his last 10, but his minutes have really lifted over his last 4 games, but he's only covered this in 1 out of his last 4. Grant Williams can make some threes. His line's at 1.5. He's only hit this in 2 out of his last 10, only averaging 3.9 attempts per game. So yeah, Grant Williams capable of a big game, but has not delivered as of yet anyway. Miles Bridges. Let's take a look. He's got a good matchup here against the Pistons. He has covered in 4 out of his last 10, 2 on the trot. Scored 20 points the last time these teams played, but he does have a good matchup, so I'd be a bit hesitant. Assist-wise, 3.5. 4 of his last 10. Only had 2 assists against the Pistons last time. Does have a great matchup. And rebound-wise, lines at 8.5 plus money. He's covered this in 8 of his last 10 games. And against the Pistons last time, he had 10 boards. So struggling to see why. Actually, the Pistons are a pretty good rebounding team. This might be something worth looking into. Normally when I see numbers like this, I'm probably quick to jump on it, but Miles Bridges rebounds requires a bit of extra research there. But I don't hate it. Gave me a bit of a tingle. Nick Richards, quickly check his points in his rebound line. Not a bad matchup here against the Pistons. Covered in 3 of his last 10. Did score 21 points when these teams last matched up. If you think Lightning can strike twice, you can take the over again. His rebound line, 9.5. 5 out of his last 10. Matchup's not good nor bad. Had 10 rebounds the last time they played. Covered in 2 of his last 6. Brandon Miller. So this is a road game. Brandon Miller on the road. Not that great. But let's check this out. So against the Detroit Pistons, he does have a difficult matchup. He's covered this line in 3 out of his last 10 games. Against Detroit, 17 and 23. 1 of his last 2. Did score 23 points on the road at Detroit too, so that's not too bad. His 3-point line is 2.5. He's covered in 4 out of his last 10. Does have a difficult matchup. How many threes is this guy taking? Wow, he's taken almost 8 3-pointers per game. And against the Pistons, he had 5 the last time they played. Rebound-wise, that line's at 5.5. Has covered in 2 consecutive games against the Detroit Pistons. And in his last 10, has covered in 5 of his last 10. 4 out of his last 5, though. So that's not too bad, but at 5.5, it's a little bit too high for me. Vasily Michik. He's been playing pretty good. Limited sample size, but check that out. Pretty consistent performer. Lines at 13.5. I think his last 5 games probably most relevant. 2 out of his last 5 games. Does have a good matchup here against the Pistons. He shoots the ball almost 13 times per game. So he's not shy to put it up. So that's not too bad. 3-point prop. Lines at 1.5 plus money. Gone under in 5 straight. So he doesn't take many 3-pointers. Looking at his assist prop. His assist prop is 7.5. He's covered in 1 of his last 5. Did have 10 against the Brooklyn Nets. The matchup's not too difficult, but I wouldn't be willing to take that. And his rebound line's at 2.5. Has covered this in 3 consecutive games. Does have a difficult matchup against the Pistons here. So yeah, his points line is okay, but it didn't get me rock solid. So let's jump into the next one. It's the Phoenix Suns versus the Cleveland Cavaliers. All right, so got a lot of markets here for the Phoenix Suns, although the Cleveland Cavaliers, quite difficult at the moment. Pretty bare. Darius Garland's a game-time decision. Max Strus, Dean Wade, Donovan Mitchell, and for the Suns, Devin Booker is a game-time decision. So we don't know who's going to play for the Cavs in this one. Quite a few markets to get through. We'll start with Darius Garland, though. His points prop in this game is 23.5. It's a good matchup against the Phoenix Suns, but let's check to see what Darius Garland's dealing with. It's a left wrist soreness. So it's not an absolute game changer, given he's right-handed, but he's covered this line in 2 out of his last 10 games. Against Phoenix, scored 22 points against them last time. His 3-point market is at 3.5. It's plus money. He's gone under in 4 straight, 3 of his last 10, but does have a good matchup. Only hit 2 3-pointers against him last time. His assist prop at 7.5. He's hit in 3 of his last 10. He went under with 7 assists last time, but the matchup is good for both of these props. Rebound wise, 2.5, 4 of his last 10, and 2 rebounds last time he played. So line's a little bit elevated given the matchup, but we also don't know who's going to be playing. Personally, I bet a Darius Garland under, and he did this against Minnesota. I feel like the matchup is really good here. So naturally, the sportsbook is probably going to be expecting an over when it comes to the bettors. But I honestly feel that the number is just a little bit too high, especially if he is dealing with left wrist soreness. The Suns are 5.5-point favorites. There's a very small chance that Donovan Mitchell plays, but if Strus plays, he could take a little bit of weight, I guess, a little bit more of the scoring load off. But if he doesn't, yeah, I'm not sure. My gut just tells me to take the under, but so many players at a game time decisions. Probably the smartest thing to do is not to bet it at all. So let's do the smart thing for this one, and I might get stupid with it a little bit later. Let's have a look at the Phoenix Suns. D Book. His points prop in this game is 25.5. Somewhat difficult matchup here against the Cavs. He's covered in 4 of his last 10, and he's yet to verse Cleveland. His 3-point market, 2.5 3-pointers made. He's only hit in 1 out of his last 10 games, and he has a difficult matchup against Cleveland. He's covered this in 6 out of his last 20 games, but only 1 out of his last 10. He's taking, on average, 5 attempts per game. Line's at 2.5. So the under on that, minus 165. It's pretty juiced, but I still might play with that, especially if we're looking at some parlays. So I might take note of D-Book unders. I ain't afraid of unders anymore. Come at me. Let's have a look at his assist prop. 5.5, 5 out of his last 10. Difficult matchup here against Cleveland. And his rebound prop is at 3.5. He's covered in 4 out of his last 10. And he also has a difficult matchup against the Cavs. So just want to see, Devin Booker's coming back from a right ankle sprain. I was going to say, I wonder if they're going to ease him into it, but who knows? He could go full throttle, right? And just completely take over the game. So not too confident taking his under on his PRA, but the 3-point market, I could muck around with that. He's going to have the size advantage in that backcourt. So some middies, some high post work potentially. We shall see. Bradley Beal, his points prop in this game, 17.5 points. He's covered in 6 out of his last 10. Shooting guards have a difficult matchup. Threes have a good matchup. So him and Grayson Allen, kind of interchangeable, so I wouldn't worry too much about the matchup. But 6 out of his last 10. His assist prop lines at 4.5. He's covered in 6 out of his last 10. But if we have a look at his assist prop with Devin Booker in the lineup, who I expect to play, Bradley Beal's actually covered in 5 out of his last 6 games. His rebound prop, oh, sorry, I did that completely wrong. Those are games without Devin Booker. Games with Devin Booker, 6 out of his last 10, 1 out of his last 4. Yeah, look, I'm on the fence about it. That means don't touch it. Rebound-wise, 3.5, 4 out of his last 10. So nothing on Bradley Beal that's really excited me in this one. Kevin Durant, let's check this man out. Lately, man hasn't been afraid to shoot. He does have a difficult matchup, but the Cavs don't have Evan Mobley, so it's not too difficult. He'll most likely be defended. It won't be Dean Wade defending him. I think Isaac Okoro probably takes it on, but he's got a significant size disadvantage against Kevin Durant. So I'm going to ignore the data here on Outlier, and I'm going to say Kevin Durant has a great matchup. So his points prop, 25.5. His last 3 games, 35, 35, and 45. My man's on something. Devin Booker might be back, but Kevin Durant's in this type of mood, and he's going to shoot the ball 20-plus times. I don't mind the 25 points. Shots in his last 2 games. So the efficiency is definitely there. So points prop, I'd probably lean to the over on that one. Have a look at his assist market. His line's only 3.5. He's covered in 6 out of his last 10. Difficult matchup. The Cavs allow the 4th fewest assists across the league. But looking at his rebound prop, lines at 6.5. He's covered this in 5 out of his last 10 games. So very up and down there for Mr. Durant. So his points prop, I'm just don't mind that one. I'm leaning towards that one, but I'll investigate it a bit further. Now, Yusuf Nurkic, he'll be up against Jared Allen in this game. His points prop's 10.5. He's covered in 4 out of his last 10. His rebound prop, That is at 10.5 as well. He's covered it in 4 consecutive games now since his 31-point outburst, 7 out of his last 10. The matchup isn't overly difficult. If the Cavs are going to be missing some star players, we're going to shoot a lower percentage in this game and give Yusuf Nurkic more rebound opportunities. Jared Allen's not going to take him away from the rim. So I've managed to talk myself into Nurkic rebounds, but I'll look into it a little bit further. Nurkic rebounds and his assist prop. Very capable passer. Check that out. He's covered in 5 consecutive games. The matchup is not an easy one, but he has covered in 7 out of his last 10. And this is a plus money play, plus 130. You might want to look at games with Devin Booker. Obviously, D-Book's been out. And without Booker, he's hitting 6 out of his last 10. So no real consistency, but I think if you're looking at mathematically, if you took this bet 100 times, I think you'd win more than 50 times, right? So, and if you're getting it at plus money, it's probably a very profitable exercise if that's the way that you bet. Having a look at Grayson Allen, though. His points prop is at 12.5. He's covered in 4 out of his last 10. His assist prop, 2.5. Covered in 6 out of his last 10. His 3-point prop is at 2.5. Covered in 4 out of his last 10. Against Boston, he made none. And in that game, 0 for 4. So, yeah, can really just stop shooting out of nowhere, Grayson Allen. His rebound line's at 3.5, and he's hit that in 5 out of his last 10. So, look, this particular game, I'd be hesitant to bet on a lot of it until the lineups are confirmed. But Yusuf Nurkic rebounds, I don't mind that because we know Jared Allen's going to play 35 to 40 minutes, provided it's not a blowout. If the Cavs offense has difficulties, Nurkic should rack up a lot of rebounds. And Kevin Durant just scoring the ball is extremely efficient at the moment. It makes no sense for him to stop shooting. So hopefully he continues to stay aggressive. And I think that 25.5 point line, I reckon he can cover that. But I'll look into that a little bit more later on. Jumping to the next game, and it's littered with some players that I've been betting on lately. It's the Dallas Mavericks versus Chicago Bulls. No major game time decisions in this one, so quite a few props available. So let's jump into it. Let's check out Luka Doncic. So what are the chances he gets a 30-point triple-double in this one? My Lord. So if you're looking at matchups, difficult matchup. The Bulls allow the fewest points to point guards on the season. Despite Luka covering this line in 5 consecutive games, the line's only at 33.5. He struggled against the Bulls in the past. 13 and 18 points the last 2 games that they played. In that 18-point game, that was earlier this season in November. He played 40 minutes. He shot 5 from 16. So an off night for Luka Doncic. If you're looking at his 3-point market, the line's at 3.5. He's covered in 7 of his last 10, 4 consecutive games. And against the Bulls, he's obviously struggled. His assist prop is at 10.5. It is a plus money play. He's covered in 6 out of his last 10 games. Against the Bulls, he had 10 assists last time. Rebound-wise, that line's at 9.5. He's covered this in 6 consecutive games. My God, how many triple-doubles is this guy going to get? Tough matchup here. Gone under the last 2 games against the Bulls. So, look, if this guy's looking to make history and just keep rattling these stats off on a consistent basis, then, yeah, take Luka Doncic for a triple-double. I don't know what type of odds you're going to get for it, but, yeah, I'm not willing to play that. Is this the triple-double? Yeah. So it's plus 180 for him to get a triple-double. Plus 180. Yeah, I don't know. I still wouldn't do it, but look, he's a freak of nature at the moment. So if you're interested in that, you can get on it. I'd prefer to have other reasons behind why certain bets are going to land, apart from he did it in his last 4 games or did it in his last 5 games. Tough matchup here against the Bulls, so you can't deny that. But Luka's that great. It might not matter. So Kyrie Irving, his points prop, 24.5. The matchup against the Bulls is not a difficult one, but it's not an easy one either. He has covered in 6 out of his last 10, has gone under in 3 straight. His 3-point market is at 2.5. Check this out. He's covered in 8 out of his last 10 games, minus 119, and he's got a great matchup against the Bulls. Looking at his attempts for this one, 7.8 attempts on average. The Bulls going to be sending a lot of traffic Luka's way, that's for sure. So Kyrie, 3-pointers made. Pretty confident I'll take that. I think I've seen enough, but I'll look into that a little bit further. His assist prop, 4.5. He's covered in 2 out of his last 10. Does have a good matchup against the Bulls as well. And his rebound matchup, tough matchup against the Bulls, but he has covered in 6 out of his last 10. So, yeah, I like Kyrie's 3-point one, obviously, the most. PJ Washington, his points prop here is 11.5. He does have a good matchup against the Bulls, covered in 5 out of his last 10 games. His 3-point market, 1.5, covering in 4 of his last 10. Looking at his rebounds, the line's at 5.5. He's covered in 7 out of his last 10 games. Has an excellent matchup here against the Bulls. Jumping into these Chicago Bulls, we've got Kobe White. Let's have a look at Kobe. Now, his points prop is at 20.5. Somewhat difficult matchup against Dallas. Has covered in 4 out of his last 10. 1 of his last 3 against Dallas. His 3-point prop, 2.5. He's covered in 5 out of his last 10. Gone under in 3 consecutive games against the Mavs. And his assist lines at 6.5. 3 out of his last 10. The matchup's not too bad here against Dallas. Has covered in 2 out of his last 3. And his rebound prop, 4.5. 7 out of his last 10. Decent matchup against the Mavs, but only covering in 1 of his last 3 games. Who else we got? Ayo Dosunmu. So he's been pretty decent these days. He plays a lot of minutes. He does have a great matchup here. But looking at his points prop, 13.5. 6 out of his last 10. 1 of his last 3 against the Mavs. His 3-point prop, been hitting quite well. Has hit in 2 of his last 3 games against Dallas. In his last 10, he's hit this in 8 out of his last 10. So Dosunmu 3-pointers. I don't mind that. How many is he taking? He's taking about 6 3-point attempts per game, and we only need 2 of these. So he's shooting 36%, so might be something I can muck around with. His assist prop does a decent job here. 7 out of his last 10, he's covered 4.5. But against Dallas, 1 out of his last 3. Looking at his rebounds, lines at 3.5, 4 out of his last 10, 2 out of his last 3 against the Mavs. So yeah, his 3-point prop probably got my attention the most. Nikola Vucevic, points line 20.5. He's covered in 7 out of his last 10. Somewhat difficult matchup against the Mavs, but Vucevic has been playing very well lately. He's been quite aggressive. Check out his shot attempts. Almost 20 shot attempts from the field. It's pretty wild. Head-to-head matchups. Scored 20, 20, and 21 against Dallas. So that line at 20.5. It's probably smack bang where it needs to be. He makes some 3-pointers in his last game. Interested to see what his prop's at. 1.5. He's covered in 5 of his last 10. The Mavs, they do allow the 6th most 3-pointers made to centers on the season. But against Dallas, he's only covered in 1 out of his last 3. Looking at his assist prop, the line's at 2.5. 2 of 3 against Dallas. 4 out of his last 10. And if you look at his rebounds, that line's at 11.5. 5 out of his last 10. And against the Mavs, 1 out of his last 3. He did, however, record 20 rebounds in his last game against Dallas. DeMar DeRozan. My God, I've been liking it again. These days, I just never thought I'd get to this point, but I do like betting on DeMar DeRozan. Shit's wild. Now, looking at his points prop, 25.5. I feel like that's a little bit too high for me. I'd probably lean to the under here. But we know the Mavs, not the best defenders, depending on who picks up DeMar. It could be a long night. I'm having a look at the matchups here, and I think there'll be a mix of Derrick Jones and mostly Derrick Jones, I think, a bit of PJ Washington, Josh Green when he's on the court. I think they'll be the main ones picking up DeMar DeRozan in this one, but I don't see any DeMar DeRozan having an issue with them. What I see the issue with DeMar DeRozan is just taking enough shots. So he's averaging 17 shot attempts per game, but as you can see, sometimes he only shoots 12 to 13 times, and that can almost guarantee your bets are dead. What he does do well, very similar to Jimmy Butler, is he gets to the line. So you're banking on some, I wouldn't say good refereeing, but you're banking on some refereeing calls and DeMar DeRozan to be aggressive. I just don't feel I can get there. He scored 28 and 16 in his last 2 games against the Mavs. But his assist prop, that might be something I can mess with. Obviously, Dallas, they give up a lot of assists per game. He's covered in 5 out of his last 10. Last game against Dallas, he did have 7 assists. So the 5.5 assists for DeMar, yeah, not speaking to me, but look, I could see it happening. His rebound prop, 4.5. He's covered it in 3 straight, 5 out of his last 10. Dallas do allow a lot of rebounds. DeMar's hit this in 1 of his last 2. So only played 32 minutes in those 2 games against Dallas, playing close to 40 minutes over his last 10. So he's going to get a lot of runtime and a lot of opportunity. But yeah, I think he has a good game. I'm just not feeling it, to be honest. So let's jump into the next game. It's the Golden State Warriors looking to get some revenge on the San Antonio Spurs. Matchup-wise, so Steph Curry's still out. Moses Moody, Draymond Green, game-time decisions. Devin Vassell, he's also a game-time decision for the San Antonio Spurs. All right, so we're going to have a look at Trey Jones first, San Antonio Spurs. His points prop here is at 8.5. He's covered in 4 of his last 10. Struggled over his last 4. Has a pretty decent matchup here against the Warriors, though. Has covered in 2 out of his last 4. He's got under in his last 2. His assist prop, probably his main prop if you're looking at betting him. He does have a great matchup. 12 and 11 assists in his last 2 games. 5 out of his last 10. He had 11 assists the last time he played the Warriors. Went under in the 3 games prior to that. He played decent minutes. So, yeah, look, he's still somewhat inconsistent. I wouldn't feel comfortable betting on that one. Wemby looks like he's back, ready for action. Points prop here is at 22.5. He's covered this in 5 out of his last 10. Scored 22 points against the Warriors last time. His 3-point prop, 1.5. He's covered in 8 out of his last 10 games. Only made 1 3-pointer against the Warriors last time. His assists, the line's at 3.5, covering in 7 out of his last 10. Does have a good matchup here. And he had 4 assists the last time they played. So I'm not minding the look of this. I might add that to my short list. But let's have a look at his rebounds. That line is at 11.5, covering in 5 out of his last 10 games. Had 9 rebounds against the Warriors last time. Jumping into Jeremy Sohan. Points line, 12.5, covering in 5 out of his last 10. Matchup's not too bad, but against the Warriors, it's covered in 1 of his last 4. Did score 20 points the last time they played, though. His assist prop, that's at 1.5, covering in 6 of his last 10. Does have a good matchup. 1 of his last 4 against the Warriors. And his rebound prop is 6.5. He's covered this in 6 out of his last 10 games. Does have a good matchup here. And has covered in 2 out of his last 4 against the Warriors. Devin Vassell. Points on his 21.5. He's covered in 6 out of his last 10. The matchup with the Warriors isn't an easy one. Not a hard one either. Did score 24 points the last time he played them. Covering in 1 of his last 2. 3-point prop, 2.5. 5 of his last 10. 1 of 2 against the Warriors. His assist prop is at 4.5, covering in 8 of his last 10. Does have a difficult matchup, though, and has severely gone under in his last 2 against the Warriors. His rebound prop, 4.5, 5 out of his last 10, 5 out of his last 6, really. Difficult matchup, and has gone under in both games against the Warriors. Jumping into the Golden State Warriors, who do we see? Klay Thompson. So his points prop, 19.5, covering in 4 out of his last 10. Does have a good matchup here. Against the Spurs, 2 out of the last 4 games he's gone over. I think it's best to check out his last 10 games without Steph Curry, and check this out. 7 out of his last 10, he's gone over 19.5 points. Against the Spurs, he scored 27 points in his last matchup against them. No Steph Curry. Had a great game. Lines moved to 19.5. In this game, he shot 8 for 16, 5 from 10 from deep, and he made 6 free throws as well. So I'd probably lean to the over on Klay Thompson here, but yeah, still, I don't know if I can trust him. It makes sense. The odds are pretty good. And I guess who else is going to score points for the Warriors? You might see Jonathan Kuminga, but if Wemby's in there, it might deter Jonathan Kuminga from attacking the basket. So I'll take Klay Thompson's name down, but how the other players' lines form and shit look, that'll determine whether I look into Klay Thompson a little bit further. I didn't check his 3-point market. My bad. All right, his line's at 3.5. He's covered in 6 out of his last 10. Good matchup against the Spurs. Without Steph Curry, he's covered his 3-point line in 6 out of his last 10 games. He averages 10 attempts. So you really needed him to shoot at least to make 4 from 10 perhaps, which he's currently averaging, and the matchup is good. But I think the other hesitation I have is that the Spurs, they just played the Warriors, and they could make adjustments in this game. Jonathan Kuminga, his points line 21.5. Difficult matchup against the Spurs, but he has covered in 3 of his last 10, including the 26 points against the Spurs when they last met. Prior to that, he had gone under in 3 consecutive games. His assist props at 2.5, covering in 5 out of his last 10. Had 2 assists against the Spurs last time. And his rebound props at 6.5, covering in 3 out of his last 10. And he only had 3 rebounds against the Spurs. So, yeah, I don't know if I like Kuminga in this one with Wemby patrolling the paint. I'm a little bit uncertain. But let's have a look at Podziemski. 12.5 is his line. He's covered this in 3 out of his last 10. Has a good matchup, but has gone under in 6 consecutive games. 2 games against the Spurs, he went under in both of them. Looking at his assist prop, lines at 4.5. 4 of his last 10. Did have 7 assists against the Spurs last time. 2 assists in the game prior to that. So we might check his assist prop without Steph Curry. He's covered in 2 out of 4 games, so that's not overly impressive. Rebounds, lines at 6.5. 3 out of his last 10. Had 6 rebounds against the Spurs last time, but has gone under in 2 straight. And the last one is Draymond Green. So let's check out Draymond. Lines at 8.5. 2 of his last 10. Good matchup, but only scored 7 points against the Spurs last time. Has gone under in 4 consecutive games against them. His assist prop, 5.5. He's covered in 4 out of his last 10 games. 2 of his last 4 against the Spurs. And his rebound props at 7.5. He's covered in 5 of his last 10 and only 1 of his last 4 against the San Antonio Spurs. So, yeah, probably lean to the under on his points, but 8.5, it's quite a low line. If he makes 3 3-pointers, we're toast. Last one is for CP3, Chris Paul. Good matchup against the Spurs. He's covered this line in 4 of his last 10. In this particular game, he had 10 points going to the fourth quarter and didn't make a bucket at all. Let's check his points line without Steph Curry. And you can see that Chris Paul has covered this in 7 out of his last 10 games. So, does have a good matchup. I don't mind this one. Just saying. He only took 9 shots against the Spurs last time, though. So, I'd be a little bit hesitant. He shot 44% from the field, which is in line with his average. He shot 2 from 3 from downtown. So, yeah, I'd probably lean to the over here for Chris Paul, but at minus 120, I'm not sure if I love it. Here's the assist prop. That's at 8.5 plus 100. 9 assists against the San Antonio Spurs last time. With Steph Curry out of the lineup, Chris Paul's covered this in only 3 of his last 10. So that line is a little bit high, but great matchup here. Warriors looking for revenge, but Wemby's back. So, yeah, I'm a little bit hesitant. I think that Klay Thompson bet's probably looking pretty good. I think the Warriors are going to have to kill him from deep, but yeah, I'll see. I'll look into that a little bit more a bit later. Then we have the Toronto Raptors versus the Denver Nuggets. RJ Barrett is a game time decision. Chris Boucher, Bruce Brown, game time decisions as well. Start with these Toronto Raptors though. Emmanuel quickly. We bet his assist the other day and that was painful. Went in overtime and he didn't get any either, so that sucked. But let's have a look at it. His points prop, 20.5. He's covered in 6 out of his last 10. Yet to verse the Denver Nuggets. Toronto are on the road in this one, but he has played well in his last 2 road games covering this line. His 3-point line is at 2.5, minus 160 though. Tough matchup, but he has covered in 7 of his last 10. And looking at his assist, 7.5's the line, 4 out of his last 10 games, and the matchup is a difficult one here too. Rebound-wise, 4.5's the line. The matchup is difficult. He's covered this in 9 out of his last 10 games though. So he's going to get a lot of minutes, a lot of opportunity, but could be tough against the Denver Nuggets. But his form lines are definitely great. The next time the Raptors play, Emmanuel quickly most likely will be on the cards. RJ Barrett. So I did say he's a game time decision. What's he suffering from? Just an illness. Right. Okay. Well, I wouldn't say just an illness, but he's feeling sick. Points prop 22.5. He's covered in 6 out of his last 10 games. If we're going to look at the matchups here, has a pretty decent matchup here against Denver. 6 out of his last 10. If you're looking at his assists, the line's at 4.5. He's covered in 4 of his last 10, and the matchup is good there too. And his rebound prop is at 6.5, only covering in 3 of his last 10. But the matchup is pretty good. 3-point markets, 1.5, covering in 6 out of his last 10. The Nuggets don't allow too many 3-pointers, so that might be difficult for RJ Barrett. But given that he's a bit ill at the moment, it might not be something that I play. Now, Kelly Olynyk is one of the most budget versions of Nikola Jokic you're going to find in the league, but he is capable of getting some points, some rebounds, and some assists as well. So let's see what we find. His line's at 12.5. He's covered in 4 out of his last 10 games. He does have a pretty good matchup if you're looking at scoring. Obviously, Jokic is not a notable defender. Kelly Olynyk can shoot it from downtown, get some cheap stuff down low as well, but somewhat inconsistent. The line in this game is Denver minus 14, so there's a good chance of a blowout as well, so that might restrict his opportunities. His assist line's at 5.5. He's covered in 3 of his last 10. Good matchup against Denver. And his rebound line's at 7.5. He's only covered in 1 of his last 10. We've actually bet his under a few times now. I think twice I've bet his under. I didn't take it against Portland, but he went under anyway. And in that game, he played 32 minutes. So it was a pretty close game. Went to OT. Still didn't cover his line. So I don't know. Do I bet the Kelly Olynyk under again? I might have to. I just want to check the odds. Minus 120, so it's not too bad. Might be one of the ones that fits under the parlay, but Kelly Olynyk under rebounds. Has been hitting quite often. Gary Trent Jr. So bet he's over in his last game, 15.5 points, and he covered that quite well, 23 points now. So without Scotty Barnes, my man's been getting busy, but he has covered this line in only 3 of his last 10. If we look at games without Scotty, he's covered 4 out of his last 7. So he's played quite well, but there's a chance that Bruce Brown is back. That could eat into his minutes as well. So he's playing a lot of minutes as of late. I think this line's just about right. I'm not too confident taking it. Matchup's a little bit difficult. Looking at his assist prop. All right, that line's at 1.5, 6 out of his last 10. So ain't nobody better than this guy's assist. Let's go straight to his 3-point prop. 3.5. He's covered his last 10, and he's got a difficult matchup. So not feeling Gary Trent Jr. in this one. Let's have a look at the guys from Denver. Jamal Murray. His points prop, 22.5, scored 37 points in his last game against the Utah Jazz. Has a difficult matchup to score some points. The Raptors don't let too many in. He's gone under in 2 of his last 3 games against them. The Thunder, however, do allow a lot of assists. So Jamal Murray's line's at 7.5. He's covered in 4 out of his last 10. And against the Raptors, he's covered in 1 out of his last 3. You like his rebounds, they're at 4.5. They're in covered in 3 of his last 10. Good matchup, had 5 rebounds when they last played, but has covered in only 1 of his last 3 games. KCP, we'll check his points and his 3-point market. 10.5's the line. He's covered in 6 consecutive games. He's got a pretty good matchup here, but against the Raptors, he's gone under in 3 consecutive games. 3-point market, you're going to find it 1.5. He's covered in 6 out of his last 10. Against the Raptors, 1 of his last 3. Did make 2 3-pointers the last time they played. Michael Porter Jr. Points lines at 16.5. He's covered in 7 out of his last 10 games. Has a great matchup here against the Raptors. And he's covered in 2 out of his last 3. Did only score 12 points the last time they played. In that game, he shot pretty poorly. 5 from 13. So Michael Porter Jr. might be able to mess around with this one. 3-point prop. Great. Line's at 2.5. He's covered in 6 out of his last 10, 2 out of his last 3 against the Raptors. Does have a great matchup here as well. In terms of 3-pointers, so in the blowout, he only played 22 minutes, made 3 3-pointers, hasn't attempted too many as of late. But against the Raptors, averaging 7 attempts per game, just shot very poorly the last time these teams met. So Michael Porter Jr., I think I like, I'm just thinking, do I like his points or his 3-point prop a little bit better? I'll jot them both down and see what happens. Rebound-wise, line's at 16.5. Has a good matchup, 6 out of his last 10, but has gone under in 3 straight games against the Raptors. So I think we also need to factor in there's a chance of a blowout here. So if the blowout occurs, less minutes for these boys. Aaron Gordon, his points prop, 13.5. 7 out of his last 10 games, he's covered the line. The matchup's not too bad against Raptors, and he's covered in 2 out of his last 3. His assist prop is 3. 5 out of his last 10. Has gone under in 2 or 3 games against them. And rebound-wise, we're looking at 6.5. 4 out of his last 10, and he's gone under in 3 straight games against the Raptors. So if Porter Jr. and Aaron Gordon are going under in their rebound props, you'd probably assume Jokic is going over. So let's check him out. Points line, 26.5. Matchup, not too difficult against the Raptors, but not an easy one either. He's covered in 4 out of his last 10, 2 out of his last 3. So his last 2 against the Raptors, 28 and 31 points. His assist prop, 9.5, 5 out of his last 10. And he's gone under in 3 straight games against the Raptors. His rebound prop, 12.5. He's covered in 5 out of his last 10 and covered in 2 out of his last 3 against the Toronto Raptors. So he did have 15 rebounds the last time they played. So up against Kelly Olynyk, can see Nikola Jokic really hammering the boards, but at minus 128, I don't think that's worth the play. I'm actually thinking about maybe taking the under in his assists, but minus 128, so I don't really like the odds that much either. What else I really like within this game, so probably Kelly Olynyk unders on the boards instead of betting Jokic's overs on the boards. Something on Michael Porter Jr., I think. I'm not minding that one. And then, disappointingly, the last game, it's the Boston Celtics versus the Portland Trailblazers. The Boston Celtics have Drew Holiday, Derek White, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum. They're all game-time decisions. Porzingis is already out, and the Trailblazers have Jeremy Grant as a game-time decision as well. So we only have Anthony Simons available. So his points prop 21.5. He's covered 5 consecutive games. Has a good matchup here against the Boston Celtics. In head-to-head matches, he scored 17 points the last time these guys played. That was last year. And last year, Marcus Smart was in the building, not Drew Holiday. In that game, he shot 5 for 15. This is a home game for Portland. At home, he's been playing quite well. These last 3 games have been at a homestand, 29, 23, and 23. The Celtics, let's check the three. They do allow some 3-pointers as well. So he's covered that in 5 consecutive games, 3.5. Lines at plus 110. And in head-to-head matchups, he had 2 last time. So he is taking 8.5 3-pointers made per game. If he shoots it 9 times and you need 4, it's a percentage which is higher than what he's been hitting as of late. So, yeah, I wouldn't be overconfident taking that pick, but I don't mind his points prop, to be honest, because he can attack the basket, get out on the fast break as well. Looking at his assist, 6 out of his last 10 games, he's covered this. Matchup isn't too bad, but he only had 4 assists against the Celtics last time. And rebound-wise, he's covered in 6 out of his last 10. Has a great matchup here, but only had 1 rebound against the Celtics last time. So, Anthony Simons, I'll have a look at your points prop, my boy. So 6 games on this slate. Managed to get through this quite quickly thanks to a lot of game time decisions, which is unfortunate. I know you guys prefer to see a deep dive on more players, but look, if they're not available, not much more that I can do. So, what public service announcements can I make? Firstly, change my thumbnails. First time in years I've changed the thumbnails. I'd love to get your thoughts on it. I did share that in the Discord. A lot of people did vote for that version of the thumbnail, so I'll continue to do those unless people stop clicking. So new thumbnails, let me know what you think. Or do you prefer the previous a little bit better? Other reminders, outlier.bet, free 7-day trial in the link in the description below. I've also got a link to Bet US. They're going to match your first 3 deposits, 125% with bonus bets. I did get some feedback around what type of video you want to see. So it looks like I'll be sharing a video on the truth about parlays, hopefully sometime this week. And then the following video will be how to guarantee money, how to guarantee profit with bonus bets. So I'll be looking into both of those. But look, things are going quite well. I want to remind you the subscriber goal. The next goal is for 5,000. I'd like to hit that before the end of March. I think that'd be amazing. I think we're about maybe 650 subscribers away. So if you're not already subscribed to the channel, I checked the analytics. 55% of the people who watch these videos are not subscribed. You know I'm going to deliver on a daily basis. The picks aren't always going to hit, but at least the research is going to be there for you. This is gambling after all. We can't win every single day, but shit, I'm trying to. So if you did make it this far, I thank you. I appreciate you. Drop me a comment. Let me know what your thoughts are, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace.
Sub to the channel cause your boy's getting busy. Coming to you live from the west side of Sydney. We've got the free picks and the juice on the daily. It's all free, you don't even have to pay me.